We've been doing a series on 5D, which stands for five dimensions. These are the five dimensions here with two subdimensions here that make up a map of our inner life, makes up a map of the total person from a biblical lens. And we've been systematically going through each dimension, and we're now on body. And we've done a couple of sessions on body. We're going to do another one today. And for those of you who may have just joined before the disclaimer, just a reminder, some of the parts of what we're going to talk about today could be triggering. So protect and guard your own nervous system. I'm going to try to handle this delicately, sharing what I believe to be the truth, but handling it in a loving way, but staying faithful to what I understand to be true. In order for us to talk about the body, uh, I would be amiss if we didn't take at least one session and talk about the theology of marriage, sex, and covenant, and what is a biblical view of that from my own understanding, because they all involve the body. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. If we go back to the prototype, if we go back to the very first marriage, uh, the very first wedding, the very first marriage, the very first man and woman, in that account, it says that God created Adam and Eve. He brought them together, and then he issues this declaration in the narrative. And he says, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So that's how it's worded. A man will leave his father and mother, cleave. So there's leaving, there's cleaving, and there's one ship. There's one flesh. This is the very first mention of covenant in Scripture. It's talking about the covenant nature of marriage. And it gives us this concept of divine math, that you've got male and you've got female, and they are created for oneness. They're created for covenant. And the word that is used is one flesh, that we've got 1 plus 1 in a very divine arithmetic way. 1 plus 1 equals 1. That you got two people who form one flesh. That word, one flesh, literally means in the Hebrew, fused together. So they are bonded. There is a whole life union, physically, relationally, spiritually, generationally. And it's not that their individuality disappears. That's not what it means. He and she still have their differences. Jacqueline and I are very, very different in personality, in temperament, in gifts. We're in perspectives, in histories. We're very, very different. And we didn't lose those differences when we entered into a covenant. But what does happen is there is a new entity, a third entity that is created in a very divine, mystical way. And that is the one flesh, the fusion of two lives becoming one. And in our coupleship, we've given it a name for that fusion. We've got Jacqueline and we've got Roy, and we kind of mash those up together, and we refer to our third entity, our coupleship, as Joy. Jacqueline, Roy, Joy, Team Joy. And that's how we refer to the one flesh, the shared life, the covenant union that we have. And we have a shared life with shared rhythms and shared routines together. We take a Sabbath together on Thursdays, and that is a special day for both of us as we enjoy God's goodness and our covenant bond on those days. And we rest our bodies, because our bodies have limited strength and capacity, and we replenish our bodies for another 6 days of hard work. We do that together as a as a covenant team. We share burdens. It's not her burdens and his burdens, it's our burdens. We share responsibilities. It's not her responsibility and his responsibility, it's our responsibility. We share resources. It's not her money and his money. It's our budget and our shared resources and our goals that we pursue together. And there is vulnerability and there is transparency and there's no keeping of secrets, and there is this bond that we try to protect. And in that Genesis account, it says that we are to leave our family of origin, and we have a brand new primary loyalty, and that is this covenant that is formed between husband and wife. And that is our main loyalty, that we forsake all others for this covenant. That, and it's not just a one-time event that happens at a wedding, but it is a repeated decision that you are my top priority. This is the most important human relationship that I have. And we make decisions, we function as a unit, as a team. And so extended family does not dominate our life. And extended relatives and other relationships do not ever take priority over this one. We leave all others so that we can cleave, so that we can fuse our life together. And I'm going to protect my spouse from any triangulation with any other family or friends in our environment, because that we are one flesh. That is the unit that I'm protecting. And so the Bible has an interesting word when it talks about the sexual union between the husband and the wife. In the Hebrew, it is the word yada, not Yoda, although that'd be cool. Yada. And it literally means to know. And the very first time this word shows up is when Adam and Eve have their first son. It says Adam knew his wife, Adam yada, his wife, and they gave birth to a son. Now, that term is a very intimate relational term. It's personal knowledge, it's deep knowledge, it's covenant. And what's very interesting is this word is used many times in the Bible to describe God's love and relationship with us, that God yada us. So this is an intimate connection of knowing and being known, that in the biblical sense, sexuality between a husband and wife is not just the interaction of the body parts. It's not just the body domain that is being engaged here, but it is a whole life union. It is knowing fully and being known fully. It's intimacy. It's into me, see. That their nervous systems are bonded together through this exclusive relationship. That God, in the way he created male and female, we are made for one flesh. We are made for covenant. We're wired for this, down to our biochemistry. God created our biochemistry in such a way that when there is this knowing that takes place, when there is this sexual intimacy between husband and wife, there are these chemicals that are released, from oxytocin to vasopressin. And even the way our brains are wired, there's certain neurons that are involved in what's called attachment circuitry that all reinforce the fidelity, the loyalty, the attachment, the exclusivity of this covenant relationship between husband and wife. God designed our bodies to bond intimately, sexually to yada in the context of the safety of a covenant exclusive relationship between husband and wife. That was his divine design. When we follow that design, the marriage bed is called blessed in the Bible. When we deviate from that design, we have what the Bible calls Gehenna, which is scorched earth, dumpster fire. Those of us who have had sexual integrity issues like me understand the severe consequences that are unique to sexual sin. God designed our bodies for oneness with our covenant spouse and with no one else. So when sex happens outside of this bond, outside of covenant, we are now fragmenting ourselves. The bond is now fragmented, and it's not a whole life exclusive covenant union, because our bodies were designed by God for one flesh permanence and exclusivity. That's why Paul goes on to say in Scripture that sexual sin is very unique. It's not like other sins that we commit. It's a sin against our own body, he says. It's a sin against our own, this dimension of who we are. Because our body was designed for a covenant. Our sexuality was designed for exclusivity, fidelity, covenant, that safety. That's what we were designed for. When we violate that, it's not that it is a more difficult sin for God to forgive. It's that it is deeper in its embodied consequences that we face. It is a unique type of sin. That what basically happens is we took this fusion, this union, this bond, this covenant, and we have ripped it. In a lot of marriage ceremonies, it says something like this: what God has brought together, let no man put asunder. That literally means rip apart. That's why, from a theological perspective, that's why betrayal is so painful. That it is the ripping of that oneness that we were supposed to have. It is the severing of that covenant that God blessed and established and designed us for. And so it feels like this death that occurs. The one flesh was literally torn apart. Now, when we think about our sexuality, there is a word used in Scripture to delicately describe it, and it shows up a couple of times in the book of Leviticus, and it's the word nakedness. And that word, nakedness, is describing the aspect of our personhood that is our sexuality. And it goes on this lengthy discourse to talk about how our nakedness, our sexuality, was meant to be bounded. We were supposed to have boundaries around our nakedness, our sexuality. And so it goes on this lengthy explanation of how our nakedness doesn't belong to anyone else but ourself and our covenant spouse and no one else. It's reserved for covenant, that there needs to be boundaries around it. And the way it describes this boundary is we are not to approach, we are not to move towards someone else's sexuality, someone else's nakedness, nor are we to share our nakedness, our sexuality with anyone else. That there needs to be boundaries and boundary markers. There needs to be containers around our sexuality, our nakedness, so that it is reserved and shared exclusively for our covenant partner. When we violate that boundary, the Bible calls it trespass. That's another word for sin. That someone else's sexuality that is not your covenant partner, someone else's nakedness that is not your covenant spouse, that is not, quote unquote, public property. That is trespassing. That is sinning against that person and their current or future covenant partner. Because that is a boundary, and you are not to approach their nakedness, approach their sexuality, nor are they to share it. So sexuality, when it is found in oneness, is beautiful and life-giving. When it steps outside of the oneness, and either we're sharing our sexuality, our nakedness, or we're approaching someone else's sexuality and nakedness, then it leads to all kinds of destruction when we don't have proper boundaries. And so one way to describe betrayal, one way to describe sex addiction or sexual integrity issues is that we need to admit, we men that stepped outside of covenant in any way, we need to admit that this was a gross boundary violation, that we did not have proper boundaries. We did not contain our sexuality or our nakedness. We either shared it with others or we approached the nakedness or sexuality of someone else. And this is not just exclusive to our bodies. This includes digital. That we are not meant to share our sexuality or nakedness with anyone else, nor are we meant to approach the nakedness or sexuality of someone else. Mental, when it comes to fantasy, and even emotional forms of uncovering what is meant for our covenant partner, and we share that emotional intimacy with someone else. So for those of us who used to consume porn, that was training our mind to uncover strangers, to look at others and objectify them. For those of us who digitally engaged in either sharing images or receiving images, this was a lack of boundaries where we did not contain our sexuality and we approached the nakedness or sexuality of others. When we engage in this, when we consume the sexuality or the nakedness of someone else, we are experiencing a counterfeit form of yada. That there's not a one life dimension to this. There's no covenant with that person. This is a disordered attachment. This is a disordered desire. Our desire and our attachment is meant for our covenant partner and our covenant partner alone. So what porn does is it fractures the one flesh design. If you're single, your body is meant to be protected and reserved for your future covenant partner. When you're consuming porn, you are fracturing that design before you get married. And inside a covenant, if you're consuming porn, you are fracturing the covenant safety within marriage. Now, the Bible has a term that I find very interesting when it describes sexual immorality. When it talks about sexual immorality, it's talking about any use of our sexuality that is outside of the covenant relationship. And it's kind of a very general term that refers to any kind of sexual activity outside of the covenant bond. And do you know what that word is in the Greek? Porneia, where we get the word porn, sexual immorality. So for those of us who have broken the covenant with our partner, is there any hope? How do we experience even the possibility of restoration? Well, stopping the acting out is not enough. It's going to require more than just stopping some of the problematic behaviors that we have. What it is going to require for us men is rebuilding our integrity, our wholeness at every level of 5D, so that we are the kind of man who this time can make a covenant that is authentic and sincere and permanent. because the first covenant has been ripped. It's been shredded. It's been violated. And there is no guarantee that the covenant will be reestablished. It takes two people. It takes the consent and the willingness of the betrayed partner. And not every relationship should be restored. Not every relationship should be reconciled. But we do follow a God who does offer forgiveness, who does offer redemption, who does offer hope, who does offer restoration, and who still performs miracles today. And so what will it require for me, who violated the covenant, to be the kind of man who can now offer a new covenant to my partner? What it's going to require is, in all 5 dimensions, we've got to become a brand new person. With our body, we now need to have boundaries, containment around our sexuality, that it is reserved exclusively for our covenant partner. We also need to regulate our nervous system within our body so that we do no harm to our partner. No more abuse. We don't pressure her for sexual intimacy before she is ready for that. We get rid of the entitlement that led to our sexual integrity issues in the first place. When it comes to our will, we need to own the damage that we've done. We need to practice radical honesty and transparency with our partners. What we did during our acting out behaviors, we had parallel realities with our partner. They thought there was just one reality, but there were actually 2, and we were controlling and manipulating both. This is not covenant. This is not fusion. This is not one flesh. What we need to do now is to be completely 100% radically, totally transparent to where we establish and maintain shared reality with our partner every day, with no omission, no delay, no intentionally manipulating their reality, but we honor them with the truth, with shared reality. That with our will, we enter into external accountability that is not dependent upon our partner monitoring us, but we willingly provide safety for them. When it comes to our thoughts, we've got to completely dismantle and let go of the false beliefs that drove our behavior. And we need to renew our beliefs around covenant, around marriage, around one flesh fusion, and around sexuality. When it comes to our emotions, we've got to develop not just cognitive empathy for her pain and the destruction that we've brought into the relationship, but emotional empathy for her pain. That we allow her to express her anger and her grief and to ask her questions in such a way that we tell her, you can pour that into me. I will be a safe container for everything I've done to you. I will not abandon you. I did not choose you in the past. I choose you and you alone now. And I will not make you pay for your pain. I will not be reactive. I will not correct you, but I will be an empathic witness. I broke this. It is part of restorative justice for me to repair this. My role is not just an observer of your pain, but I want to go from harming you to healing you, and I will put you first. At a very soul level, it means that we confess our failure, our sin, our trespassing, our lack of boundaries around the sexuality God gave us, around the covenant that He established and we broke. We confess that. Our shadow. We confess that to God. And we now bring our behavior in alignment with our values. And we invite God's Spirit to enter us, to heal us, and to guide us to be covenant keepers this time and not covenant breakers. We're talking about a complete overhaul of every dimension of your life so that you can be the kind of man who this time, if God gives you another opportunity, if your partner gives you another chance, you can be the kind of man who can make a covenant that is authentic and that is lifelong and permanent and exclusive. Socially, we need to forsake all other relationships. We need to have boundaries. There are some relationships that we need to either have boundaries around or we need to sever those relationships. That we forsake all others and we put our partner first. We need to be a part of a healing community of some kind, especially with others that are struggling with the same thing that we're struggling with. For some of you, you may need to change your job. If you were acting out on the job, if there was any kind of unhealthy attachment to coworkers or anything like that, and your partner does not feel safe with your current job, then it's incumbent upon you to change jobs, to forsake that job for the sake of your relationship. You need to have digital boundaries around what you're allowing yourself to see and receive from the culture around you. So, in summary, what we're talking about here is if we want to become the kind of man who can make a lifelong covenant this time authentically and honor it, we need to become a safe, loving, honest, whole, healthy man. Because why would she even consider the possibility of a new covenant with you? With our body, we need to provide safety. With our mind, we need to renew and embrace the truth. With our will, we need to choose her every moment of every day. With our social life, there needs to be a complete overhaul and structural change, redesigning our entire relationship landscape. And with our soul, we need to rededicate, reconsecrate, recommit our all 5 dimensions to the care and leadership of our higher power.